Breaking news. Despite a promise to leave Russia, Burger King continues to operate there. Burger King has been operating normally in Russia despite the fact that the brand's owner has been promising to leave for over a year. The franchise's 15% owner in Russia, Restaurant Brands International, RBI, told the BBC it had no new updates to share at this time on its exit. The company announced its plans to leave Russia in March of 2022. Western companies have been under increasing pressure to withdraw from Russia since the conflict in Ukraine broke out. Many people thought that RBI was sustaining Putin's regime by keeping its business in Russia. One of the largest fast food chains in the world, RBI, has had trouble leaving the country due to the complexity of its franchise agreement. This partnership involves 3 other companies and 800 restaurants. Starbucks is being replaced in Russia by a new, domestic competitor. To wit, BK. The Russian affiliator refuses to close down. Burger King's main operator in Russia refused to close the restaurants after the initial attacks on Ukraine, according to RBI President David Shear in March 2022. It would take some time, he said, and the company had started the process to sell off its 15% stake in the company. When asked by the BBC about the status of the pledge 18 months later, a representative from the Canadian-American company said they did not have any new information to share. The use of franchise agreements as a excuse was called a convenient smokescreen by Yale University researcher Stephen Tien, who was part of a team that monitored business responses to the conflict in Ukraine. He mentioned how companies like Starbucks were able to get out of their contracts and leave the country. He said that by staying in Russia 18 months after Putin's invasion of Ukraine and saying they want to leave but not actually leaving, the RBI is helping to prop up Putin's regime. According to RBI's spokesperson, the company has lost money on Burger King in Russia since the beginning of 2022, so it is refusing new investment and supply chain support. Carry out the proper action. RBI was asked to detail its efforts to exit the Russian market by Mark Dixon, founder of the Moral Rating Agency, which campaigns against companies doing business in Russia. The company should be willing to terminate the contract. To do the right thing, it must be willing to take the legal risk. Distribution of goods and services is the core function of franchises. There is the company that creates the brand name, the franchisor, and the company that pays money, the franchisee, to use the brand name and sell the products, the franchisee. Many Western brands have used it in the past few decades to break into international markets. The duration of these contracts is usually several years. Burger King is still operating in Russia, but its main competitor, McDonald's, has successfully fled the country after its parent company took over most of its restaurants. KFC's parent company, Yum! Brands, sold more than 100 Russian restaurants to a local operator in April, and those locations are now known as Rostix. Attorney David Bond of Fieldfisher said that because RBI only holds a 15% stake, it cannot dictate terms to the other shareholders and force them to close their Burger King franchises. In addition, he implied that companies that franchise out their brands would be hesitant to simply walk away from deals due to the dire consequences that could result from doing so. However, he emphasized that RBI could end the franchise arrangement if it so desired, despite the fact that doing so might not lead to the demise of the Burger King brand in Russia. He claimed that most brands in the country, including McDonald's, were the result of pre-arranged sales with local businesspeople, willing to debrand in return for the discounted purchase price. To whom do we owe Burger King's Russian operations? Burger King of Russia is owned by a joint venture that includes RBI and 3 others. With a 30% stake in the company, businessman Alexander Kobolov runs the day-to-day operations and oversees the 800 restaurants. Mr. Kolobov has been quoted as saying to the BBC that he lacks the authority or power to halt Burger King operations in Russia and that any closure would require the consent of all investors. My portion has always been way under control, he said. The largest Ukrainian investment firm, ICU Group, owns 35%. According to ICU Group, which spoke with the BBC about the franchise agreement, it has no say over the joint venture's operations in Russia or anywhere else. A buyer has been found, and the company is, at the final stage of exiting the franchise agreement, it said. Since the start of the war, the company said it had not participated in the joint venture's management or investment activities and had not received any dividends. VTB Capital is a subsidiary of VTB Bank, the largest Russian bank that is under sanctions from the United States, the United Kingdom, and other European countries.